Welcome to On the Fly, a Financial Literacy Institute podcast, where our mission is to teach the financial literacy skills we should have learned in school. We cover financial basics, investing, business ownership, real estate, and everything in between. On the fly. So, our guest this week is Jeff Mohr. Alongside me, I have my co-hosts Olayinka Famadou and Sean Lacey. So, how we doing, guys?
Phenomenal.
Life is great. Can't complain.
Cool. All right, so let's jump into it. Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background, and a little bit of what you've learned over the years about finance.
Sure. So I went to school at Ohio State, graduated in 2009 in construction management and business economics. I own my own roofing and exterior remodeling company, as well as a home care agency. So 2 businesses. I also dabble in a little bit of real estate, and that's the gist.
Nice. So how did you kind of graduate from Ohio State in construction, looking to get into owning your own business, or is that something that came along later in life?
Well, it came a little later in life. So basically, I worked for somebody. I owned a business previously with partners, and it just came to a point where it was time to start my very own with no partners. And then I started venturing off into other opportunities as well, investing and buying other businesses. And well, just one in particular, the home care agency. And that's basically it.
Gotcha. So right out of college, did you, I guess, what was your road path like out of college? Were you able to land a decent gig
No.
in construction?
So,
Okay.
I actually graduated in the worst time possible. And when I started construction management at Ohio State, which is the largest university in the world, construction management had the highest job placement. It was like 99% of kids that graduated, whether you had a 2.0, 4.0, they had a job with a salary lined up when they graduated. When I graduated in 2009, with the recession of 2008, which is mostly housing for the most part, there was no jobs, none. And there was construction management, I believe, in Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton. Everyone wanted to stay in Columbus. It's a fantastic place. And it was impossible because there was too much competition for every single job. So that's when I decided to move back to Cleveland, where I actually knew people, including Lindsay's uncle, Ron, which is separate. He didn't help me out, but he helped my previous girlfriend out. Yeah, there was no jobs. It was
right. So I guess how did you like cope with that? What was your kind of game plan, or what did you do?
I got lucky. One of my best friends from high school went to Ohio Wesleyan for 1 year, and decided to drop out after the first year and start his own roofing company with his father. And I was doing plumbing. I was in construction, obviously, so I did all kinds of stuff, but I was working in plumbing and HVAC while I was in college. And then he kept kind of begging me, like, hey, you should come work for me. And it was a lot of our friends worked for him at the time because we were all in college. And that's when I jumped over and worked with him. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And I thought I'd be a project manager or this or that sitting in an office. And the time that I graduated was it never worked out the way.
Right.
It just wasn't an option. There was no jobs. So I got into roofing and exterior remodeling, and mostly roofing at the time. I mean, when I graduated college, I was a roofer for like at least 2 years, which is not what you 3 would even. I don't think it wouldn't even be an option. It's just it was what it was.
Right.
And then the company grew and grew and grew. And then by the time I was in my mid-20s, I taught myself so much about it that I was offered ownership, and then I negotiated for more ownership and ended up buying a good chunk of the company,
Hmm.
which when you're in your mid-20s at that time seemed like a great decision, and then by the time I was 30, 31, I was, job roles weren't the same, and this, that, and that's when I decided it was probably better to sell my shares and start my own company.
Gotcha.
What a lot of people end up doing, because you do have to build knowledge before you just start your own company. People are like, oh, you
Hmm.
watch videos and like, oh, well, entrepreneurship and blah, 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 blah. But if you're not an expert in your trade, it's almost impossible to start your own business.
Hmm.
Just don't know a damn thing about it.
Right.
So that's a whole separate conversation, but that's basically where I got to be where I'm at now
Hmm.
as a business owner. And then, as things get where investing becomes this and that, whether you want to do it in the stock market or you want to be um, start businesses, which is I'm huge on starting businesses versus risking everything in crypto or
Hmm.
doing the stock market. That's separate conversation whether you want to do that or not. But I think if you learn business and you know how to operate it, it can be a risky thing, but a very rewarding
Right.
thing.
So kind of the theme we're doing today, or at least a couple questions at least, are going to be kind of debt related. So um, I know you had a little bit of experience with that, and if you don't mind talking about it, tell us, kind of how you kind of got into debt, and then what you did to get out of it, and just kind of your experiences, and any advice you would have to anyone going through that or something similar.
Sure. I already laid this out in 3 easy steps. So
Hmm.
All right.
in debt, whether you're just out of high school or just out of college, which is basically the same thing, whether you had your parents paid for your college or they didn't. So there's a couple types of student debts that people get into, whether it's credit card debt or student
Hmm.
loan debt, which is two separate, completely separate things. But to start at step one is when you graduate high school or you graduate college, hopefully you have a job. That's number one. Find a job. Step 1A would be, and most people, even adults, which is crazy, and kids that just graduate high school or college, what you need to know about yourself is what are your fixed costs versus your net income.
Hmm.
And fixed costs versus net income equals savings. That's the money you have left over. Your net income is the amount of money you make after you pay taxes. So if you're a W-2 employee, or even if you're an entrepreneur right out of high school, it doesn't matter. How much are you putting in your bank account after you pay taxes? That's what that means. So fixed costs are very important. Just everyone in high school, or I hope they're teaching this, or if you go to college, you probably take computer science and engineering, which tells you about Microsoft Excel. Spreadsheet seems so easy. And this is the easiest spreadsheet ever. There's no formulas other than sum. You're
Yeah.
just putting in rent, which most people are renting 18 or you just graduated college, rent, uh, everything down the line, utilities, and entertainment is one that I wanted to talk about briefly because when you're in your 20s, or God forbid, you're even in your teens and you're in debt, you do have to treat yourself a little bit. Clothing, groceries, you got to put a number on all these things and then sum that number up and understand what is that number. If
Hmm.
you're in credit card debt already, put that minimum number that you owe in that spreadsheet, everything. If you have Netflix and HBO and all that shit, you put all that in there. Once you understand that number of your fixed costs, if it shocks you, because most people, I mean, 9 out of 10 easily don't know that number. If you say, hey, what's your fixed cost per month? And then most people get paid every 2 weeks. So you got to calculate that per month, which if you get paid every 2 weeks, that means you get 26 payments. So it's a little mathematical thing, which if you went to high school or college, you should be able to figure that out by the month. You should figure out your monthly costs. What is the cost you're incurring every month if you have student loans, a credit card, blah, blah, blah. God forbid you already got yourself into some credit card debt. Figure that out, put it in a spreadsheet, and get the sum. That's your fixed costs. Then you weigh that versus your net income. Okay, so it could be a negative number, which is terrible. If it's a negative number, you're in deep shit. Then you need to start crossing off every single possible thing out of that spreadsheet that you can, whether it's entertainment, food, start eating cheaper, whatever you have to do if you want to get out of debt, or if you want to start your financial life, or you just live paycheck to paycheck forever and it'll never change. If you get into that groove, 18 to 25, it may never change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, 18 to 25, those are years you're going to build the habits that are going to dictate how you live for the rest of your life. So, yeah, that's a great point.
Also, during this point, you have to have the mindset of, so you just graduated high school, or you just graduated college, and you may be in some debt. It may be student loan or this or that, or you just are looking to build some sort of positive financial future. You always need to be thinking about, how am I going to increase my income? An idea, whether it's starting a business, or if you went to college to be a doctor or a pharmacist, this and that, you may be on a fixed thing, which you can climb the ladder, or it's going to be, say you're a pharmacist, for example, like you're probably going to start off with a really high salary, but who knows how much it's going to increase. It may be a slow rate of increase. There's not much of a ladder to climb when you're a retail pharmacist, but you start at a lot of money. So you got to be thinking about that. But if you start at, when I graduated college, I think when I graduated college, I was making $13 an hour for a full year. And then I made $15 an hour for a full year. And then I think it was $17 an hour. That's 2009, 2010. It was driving me crazy, working weekends. That's when entertainment becomes an important thing, because you don't want to be so obsessed with getting yourself out of debt, or just growing yourself financially where you don't have some sort of fun. You don't want, the 20s are the best years of your life. Hopefully you're in a situation where you're making enough money to where you're not in a negative number with the fixed costs, and you can enjoy yourself from time to time. It's very important, because I was bad with that, and it's a regret.
And Jeff, too, I think one issue that kind of plagues kids when they're graduating high school or college is during their time in high school and college, they may work a part-time job where they make some money. It might cover the groceries, the entertainment, stuff like that. But when they graduate and they get their first full-time job, it's a massive jump in pay. And instead of realizing that they need to take that jump in pay to invest or start saving or even paying off debt, they use it to spend more money. And then they basically are living like the same way they were living before when they had their part-time job, and still paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
Yeah. And one thing I would like to add to that, Jeff, are you familiar with Dave Ramsey?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So Dave Ramsey loves to preach the beans and rice, rice and beans, gazelle intensity when one is in debt, right? Just hitting that debt. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's baby step number 2. Can you talk about, like, what was your story, to the depth that you would like to talk about it? What was your beans and rice and beans story? But then also how you didn't just throw out all the fun. You didn't sacrifice the fun. You were able to implement some fun in there. Can you talk about that story?
No, well, you skipped a huge step, which I got to back, because
let's do it.
I told you I broke down 3 easy steps. You skipped a huge one, which is attacking debt. That's the last one. But the second step, which is extremely important, is say you're whatever, college, high school, whatever, you get a job, you need to start a security or slash Swan Fund before you do anything else, which is Swan Fund stands for just sleep well at night, or security fund. Just you have this blanket, and the blanket is the formula is it's your fixed costs multiplied by at least 3 or 6 minimum, and that's what I would say less than 1% of people do. But smart people, if you watch, I don't even care. I mean, I've known this since I was 18 years old, maybe even 16 years old. But if you watch Mark Cuban, or you'll see it. It's just it's you never know what's going to happen, whether you have insurance or not. Something might happen where you can't work, or you got hurt, or there's bullshit going on. You need to have 3 to 6 months minimum of your fixed costs saved in an account. And the smartest account to have that in would be like a money market account, because money market accounts they're liquid, they accrue a little bit more interest. You can only draw on them like 6 times a month, I think. Then if you did need to, you could click a button and transfer that to your checking, and it's liquid. you know uh so that's the step that you skipped before my story of attacking debt. I didn't do it, I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
That was stupid of me, and you should never touch that, no matter what. If you really want to be, you never know what's going to happen. You're not making a lot of money when you're younger. Most people aren't, especially if you just got a college degree, blah 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 blah, or you're starting off as an electrician, whatever it might be. You're not making that much, 18 to 24, I would say. So if your car breaks down, that's an emergency fund where you need liquid money, and you're like, oh, I never saw this coming. All of a sudden my car doesn't work, and people living paycheck to paycheck, now they can't even get to work. It's unbelievably important. So the Swan Fund, if you want to call it that, or just a security blanket fund, whatever you want to call it. Then
Mhm.
once you do that, you can start attacking debt, which is what I did
Okay.
when I was 23 or whatever.
Mhm.
You want me to go into that now, or?
Please.
Absolutely.
So attacking debt, you've got a lot of options at this point. You've got your Swan Fund, if you want to call it that. I think it's just easier to call it that. It's there. You already have your spreadsheet. It tells you what your fixed cost versus your net income, and those numbers are changing all the time, so you have to update it. You update it anytime anything changes. Really, if your fixed costs change, or if your net income increases, change it so you know. And that's that number where there's two major types of debt with younger people would be credit cards versus student loans. And the whole student loan thing, and now we're in a whole different debate with everything getting potentially erased. That's a different conversation. I'm not a good person to talk to about it, but if you have debt, like what I did with my student loans was I set a minimum. I had that number, and it was there, and it was an aggressive number. I said back then, I'm going to pay a minimum of $1,000 a month, every single month, towards my student loan debt. Some people have their parents pay for their college. That's freaking awesome. That's nothing wrong with that. You can't get mad or get jealous, or if somebody doesn't, their parents don't pay for it. You go to college. Now the whole thing with college and student loan debt is way different than almost 20 years ago when I started college. Back then, American culture was like, you're going to college. If your kids don't go to college, they're a mess up, and now it's getting 180 from that, with all the debt and all of what my generation did, and all these people that have all this debt that they can't afford to pay back. But you have to have a plan, and most people don't follow these 3 simple steps. It's not that complicated. And going back to step 1, the goal has to be, you have to be motivated to increase your income.
Mhm.
If you're not doing that, or if you're just content, you're going to be in debt forever. I mean, you
Yeah.
do, because some of this debt with the interest rates, I mean, if you do the math, you can do the math, and it's just going to take 30 years to pay off, you know.
Because you can, I kind of talked about this a little bit in a different episode. You can only pinch your pennies so far.
Exactly.
I mean, you can budget so much and you can stretch your money so far, but unless you bolster your income or find a second income, third income, those are the best ways to really attack debt and to, start building that Swan Fund and eventually become pretty financially comfortable.
Exactly.
And Jeff, too, when you graduated in 2009, and even while you were paying off your debt, what are some of the biggest things you learned about yourself and about the process?
I would say it was hard to keep going. It's week after week, you don't see anything growing. Your Swan Fund is just sitting at the same number. It's hard to, and you're working really hard. You're working lots of hours per week and grinding, and then weekends, and honestly, that's where you got to be careful with it, with debt and relationships, and that's a different conversation too, because you get so, I always say, like, I got mad at my debt, mad at it, like literally I was obsessed with just getting rid of it. And now I'm sitting here like, you mean to tell me if I just paid the minimum payments, I might get forgiven for all of it? But I don't regret it at all, because my student loans have been gone for almost 8 years now. And no, was it easy? Was there a lot of sacrifice? And I think the best advice I could give is, like, get mad at it, but don't let personal relationships fail because of it. So it's but then you can get obsessed with things, and it's hard, because I'll tell you, it's not easy to make money. It's not. It takes a lot of effort, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working you're trading your time for money, whether you're an engineer, 40 hours a week, 80 hours a week, you're on salary, whatever. It's a delicate balance of being mad, but don't sacrifice things that are going to make you unhappy and regret it at the same time. So, you know, that's what I did. And it's, y- it's delicate. You need to be aggressive paying off your debt, because it's not good. And time flies by so fast. You think like, oh, it'll just go away. It doesn't. And all of a sudden 15 years goes by and you still owe all this money. Gotta be gotta have a plan with it.
Right.
And that's just
And
student loan debt.
yeah. And everything you just said, Jeff, that just brought me back to sophomore year of college, because the grind, the grit, the tenacity that I overcame when I was literally destroying my car debt at the time. I know exactly what you went through in that aspect, because yes, I was going at it, decreasing the number, but I think in what I actually learned from that, which was again that tenacity, which was overcoming this. Really, the goal that I set for myself was getting my car payment, or my car loan, out of the way April 9th. I'll never forget that date, April 9th, when I paid that last. So, what I'm saying? That's an amazing feeling, an amazing goal to have achieved. And I think what one can learn from that is greater than the number itself, right? Because eventually, hopefully, if you have, things in place, that number will be getting paid off, but it's not about the destination, it's about that journey. And I think you can attest that. And I think that is exactly what our listeners should get out of that, which is what you will learn from this journey, which will not be easy, but you will take that. And now those skills you can take into every facet of life. And I can completely attest that. So I appreciate you telling that story.
I'm glad you said that. I should have said step 4, the journey, because I say the same thing. The journey is a curve. So you start when you're here, and then a decade goes by and you work your ass off, and then all of a sudden things start to go like this, and then they might go like that. And it's pretty cool to see if luck goes your way and you work hard and you're good at what you do, or whatever you decide to do. The journey is kind of cool to, if you're in debt, your story is a little bit cooler if you were never in debt. But it does suck. that there's nothing cool about it. I mean, I would have totally traded being in debt to anybody's story of being in debt. And we didn't even talk about credit cards yet. If you want to, we can, but that's a whole separate deal. But whether it's student loan debt or credit card debt, the last thing I forgot to say is, before you start attacking all that debt, you gotta make the minimum payments before you acquire your security fund, because I'm telling you, that's where so many people go wrong. They'll spend the extra money on their car payment, but then their car breaks down and they need $1,200 in cash to pay for it. Now your car doesn't even work. Or vice versa, whether it's, say you bought a house when you're 18 years old. People do that stuff, which I never did. Then your hot water heater stops working. Now what are you going to do? Things like that. People just don't think about it. They're like, life hasn't happened enough yet. And let me tell you, it's like you think things are going good and there'll be roadblocks. And when you go into business, if you do go into business, it's not going to be easy. It's just not. There's going to be obstacles and it's a roller coaster. But if the ride keeps going like this, you're working good, so
Right.
that's
Yeah.
it.
When you said that, it's funny because in the picture I got in my mind is that you have to sell your car for gas money. It's like, you have to be strategic with it. You have to be strategic with it. And I love that you said that, because that's so true. And now I would love to kind of transition into kind of the relationship with debt maybe you have today, because it sounds like, and I know I can attest to this as well, that debt, I hated it. I was allergic to it, one might say, right? But I think as I'm learning this as well, and how we teach our listeners that not all debt is bad. So perhaps maybe where you're at now with businesses and real estate, how do you leverage debt? Can you talk about that and maybe are building a positive relationship with certain types of debt?
Sure. Now you're going into a whole different realm. So like,
let's do it.
With debt versus an asset versus a liability. Like, any debt is a liability, but like, say the trucks I have for my construction business, they're technically an asset, technically. But I've always felt that, me personally, that it's just a cost of doing business, where I'm going to have some trucks are paid off. If I have enough money, I'll pay it off and I'll save the interest. But at the same time, it's I'm going to have truck payments, and then cars themselves are just, it's tough at some point, they're always going to be an expense, right? Whether you divide it by, I had this car for, 72 months, or I had it for 48 months. It's always a cost. It's a depreciating asset, but if you own it in your business, it's actually, I consider it an asset. And you're going to have costs with that, and there's debt. So when you talk about that, that's your fixed income, or that's your fixed costs as a business, which is different than your personal stuff, because it's you need it to operate. So it's
right.
it's a fixed cost. It's a monthly expense you're going to have. What else do we want to talk about as far as?
Well, even in real estate, right? You might have to like pull out a loan or a mortgage, but you know that perhaps what you're going to be getting on the house is going to be greater than the interest rate.
Yeah. So, I'll be totally honest. I recently, within the last 3 years, just started. I have one rental property in Cleveland. Totally agree with you. Get the loan, but you do have to put the money down. So you have to have money saved. That's another thing. So that's why up in step one, where you're always working to increase your income so you can just save. And once you pay your debts off, if you want to really get rid of them, get rid of the debt, because your savings will exponentially increase. Just put your head down, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, you can, whatever you want to start a Roth IRA, all that. It's a whole separate conversation. Or if you want to start something which is smart too, by the way, even if you wanted to, you can put in, I think, $6,000 a year. Even if you're in debt and you're one of those people like, oh, I got to feel comfortable investing. Put whatever you can, $500 when you're 20 years old. Go ahead, do it. If you can and you think you can get by and you're healthy and you think 3 months is too much of a Swan Fund, go ahead, do a Roth IRA or whatever you want, invest money. Or if you want to get into real estate, which is fantastic, but most of the time you need to put 20% down. So you're gonna need some money, but it's, great to take on that debt because your tenants are going to pay that debt off for you in the long run if you can get good tenants. So that's the thing with renting and but real estate's a fantastic thing. I flipped one house from the ground up. That went well, but it was a lot of work. And I'm building a house from the ground up this year. So we'll
Did
see
you flip that yourself, or did you hire some contractors to do some work as well?
Oh, yeah, not really. Hired a
Gotcha.
few people, but we got it right during COVID.
Oh yeah.
And I did all the lumber work right before those prices skyrocketed.
Ooh.
So I got super lucky there. And there was nothing else to do. Weekends, you couldn't go out, this and that. I spent most of my weekends. Would I do it again? No. No. I wouldn't. But
A good thing, yeah.
If
A
you
good thing to do once.
If you do hire people and do things right, and a lot of times people with flipping houses, they cut corners. I'm a contractor, so I do everything right, and then before you know it, there's just you never know what the spread's going to be as far as how much money will be left over when you list it. So it's a risky business flipping houses. I wouldn't recommend it unless you really have some bankroll, because to flip houses, you usually need cash. To purchase the houses. You get them a little bit cheaper. You can negotiate if you need to take on the debt and get a loan. The closing process is longer, so a lot of the deals fall through. So it's harder you need the cash, which comes from saving your money in step one.
Right.
It takes time, or you just make a bunch of money. Some people do really well and then they make a bunch of money fast. I was buried in student loan debt. It took me 8 years to get to zero. So, it's hard.
It's interesting because a little bit earlier, and I really want to hit this point. This is beautiful. You said this is that once you pay off any debt, as if you were kind of already paying it off. For example, like my car payment that I had, I remember, I won't forget, $232 a month. After I paid that off, because I was already assuming that I'm going to do this for a long time, I paid it off faster and faster and faster. Now that the thing's paid off, I freed up $232 every single month where I can put towards something else. Roth IRA. I can maybe add more into my fund, like my fund, my Swan Fund, whatever that means, right? But then what's also awesome is that when you pay off a debt, you kind of guarantee that return. Let's say the car was 15% interest rate on, I don't know, whatever the amount was. Because I paid that off, I just got a 15% interest rate bump because now I am not getting that decline, if that makes sense. I'm not losing that, I'm gaining that in a way. So that's so awesome that once you pay it off, you're giving yourself free money. So that's something that I really want our listeners to understand, is that you're going to be paying these debts, but once it's paid off, now that money you've been paying, that it's freed up. Use it to whatever you want to use it for. Hopefully it's smart. Roth IRA, highly recommend. But that's beautiful you said that. I wanted to make that a point. That was so, I couldn't agree more.
Same. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Your savings is you're just expendable income is going to just, now it may take several months, but you will see the difference. I remember when I first saw a difference, I was like, man, wow. It's a great feeling, but it's also not easy. You got to keep your head up through the whole process of getting out of it. And man, once you do, it's totally worth it. But have fun, but you got to work hard. And if you're not going to do that, then you won't get there.
Definitely. Yeah,
Yep.
Jeff, as we kind of draw to a close here, could you list those 3 steps again, just clearly? 1, 2, and 3.
So step one is in a summary would be figure out your fixed expenses versus your net income. Your net income is after it's the money that goes into your bank account if you have a W-2 job, which most people aren't entrepreneurs. That's separate, but your net income. Number two would be the security fund or Swan Fund. Build that to a minimum of 3 to 6 months. If you can do more, if you're healthy and this and that, and you think everything's going to be fine, 3 months. Like I said, I didn't do it when I was right out of college, but I should have. It was stupid that I didn't. I might have got lucky there, but a lot of people don't. Like if your car breaks down, things that people don't think about that. And I'll tell you, so much in the construction industry or lower income industries, whatever you want to call it, they can't get to work because they're unreliable vehicles. It's crazy. Step three is attacking debt. Just in the like we said about knowing what after your fixed expenses versus your net income, what your savings amount is. So then you can take that number and attack your debt every single month, paying as much as possible on top of what the minimum payment is, and you'll be out faster.
Gotcha.
Good.
Thank you.
Definitely. For sure. Awesome. So if you're listening, attack your debt, start a Swan Fund. And what am I missing there, Jeff? What's the other one?
Oh, fixed expenses versus
find your fixed expenses. Yeah. There you go. Find your fixed
in the reverse order.
Yes.
Number one, know your fixed costs. You got to know that, and it's crazy how many people don't. You go around, ask somebody, do you know your fixed costs? Very few people would even be able to answer that, whether they're successful or not. But it's a funny thing that you should know it, especially if you're young and in debt. You should know what you're spending your money on and put it in a spreadsheet. I don't even care if it's on a piece of paper. Just write it out and put it in a calculator so you can know, because very few people do. And that's the number one problem. Knowing where all your money's going. Are you spending it at the gas station every day? Are you spending it all on food? Where's all the money going? And then you can get yourself in order.
And what's beautiful about FLI is that we have a wealth spreadsheet on our website for our listeners. Tap into that. Exactly what Jeff just explained. We break that down in our wealth spreadsheet. You will be able to find out and now enter and track your fixed, your variable expenses. And now your net worth up, because now you're tracking it. So I don't want to digress, but please tap into that wealth spreadsheet. We have that already made for you. You just need to now start entering numbers. It'll change your life.
Perfect.
And now, awesome. Jeff, too, is your roofing and exterior remodeling company, is that in Cleveland or Columbus?
No, it's in Cleveland.
Okay. So if you want, feel free to shout it out just in case any of our listeners are looking for any work up in Cleveland.
Sure. Yeah. Level Up Renovations. I knew you'd say that. We're busy. We're good. But yeah, no, we're out of Hinckley, Ohio. And roofing, siding, windows, doors, carpentry, gutters, all kinds of other stuff. Northeast Ohio. Absolutely.
Awesome. And that's how you know that you have it's a good contractor if they're busy. If it's a contractor begging for work, especially right now, run fast and run far.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that's not busy right now, but hopefully it stays that way forever. But I mean, a lot of stuff that we do, people need. It's not a want. So if the roof's leaking, gotta replace it.
Right.
So,
Definitely.
It's kind of even in 2008. The roofing industry wasn't hit nearly as bad as a lot of others. So
definitely. Awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks so much. Those 3 steps are fantastic advice. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share some wisdom with us.
Sure. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to On the Fly, a financial literacy podcast. If you'd like to learn more, check out our website, thefli.net, and our Instagram, the Financial Literacy Institute, all one word. We look forward to you joining us on our next episode as we teach the financial literacy skills we should have learned in school.